One of the things about our show is it's going to be unique.
You are what you do. You can say any amount of things that you want to say. You can say any amount of things that you want to say, but what you do is what everybody sees.
People are like, oh, I'm just going to JV it. Like, let's just JV it. Like, what the hell does that mean?
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hang out with you guys today, so thank you so much.
Well, then that end buyer could come back and say, well, I didn't fully understand that it was subject to.
That's not a thing. Like, the SEC has thought of all of these things. They've been here since 1932.
And you can do what you want with your property.
Buyers have time, they have negotiating power, they have options.
Oh my gosh, I'm blown away by your inexperience, and they've been in business 20 years.
And that includes things other people put on your property, right? It's your property that'll be okay. Suddenly, Cousin Jimmy's in a lawsuit.
A novation is replacing one contract or one obligation with another.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, our topic is falling in love with real estate. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like our channel and subscribe. You can find us on X, Facebook, and YouTube. On all of those platforms, you can find us at the handle @InRem Podcast. That's @InRem Podcast. Go there, subscribe, like it. It helps us out a ton. We'd appreciate it. Also, you can download an audio version of the podcast, whether that be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Go there, download it. You can listen to it while you do some work on the weekend. It helps us out a ton. We would appreciate it. With that, we're going to go to Sean, who has our legal update.
Thank you, Andy. So my legal update today is sharing with everyone the fact that the one-to-one rule, consent rule adopted by the FCC under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, also called the TCPA, that was supposed to go into effect January 27, 2025, has been struck down by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And the case in which that was struck down is Insurance Marketing Coalition Limited versus FCC. So what was the one-to-one consent rule that was adopted by the FCC? Basically, it's complex, and I'm not going to go into the details of the rule because hopefully it never rears its ugly head again. But it basically sought to eliminate a loophole in the TCPA with respect to a consumer's written consent to receive robo-marketing calls. Basically, if consumers go onto certain websites, in particular comparison websites, and they basically consent by running the comparison to being contacted, which would include through robocalls, they can consent to be contacted by the companies on that site, whoever runs the website, and their quote unquote marketing partners, which could be thousands of partners. And so basically, people, these marketing companies were able to obtain consumer consent for robocalls and sell these lists. And then because they would be the marketing partners is who they're selling these lists to. And then you could, do robocalls to, whoever runs these comparisons or uses these websites. So basically the one-to-one consent rules sought to eliminate that and would require that the consumer actually opt into each company that they would be that would be calling them. So that's why it uses the word one-to-one consent, meaning, I consent to this company and this company only, not marketing partners, not, everyone that participates, but simply you opt into a specific company, a specific product that you consent to those calls from. So it basically was eliminating that loophole or trying to eliminate it. But the 11th Circuit basically ruled that the FCC exceeded its authority under the TCPA in enacting the rule. And this goes back to, and they cited the Lopper-Bright case in which and this was in 2024, in which the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the Chevron deference doctrine, which basically previously the Chevron case gave great deference to the ability of federal agencies to interpret their authority under certain statutes and the ability to then create rules and regulations according to those interpretations. It basically, Chevron basically gave significant rulemaking and regulation making authority to federal agencies. They could basically interpret statutes pretty much however they wanted and say, oh yeah, we have the ability under this statute to make this rule, this regulation, and then they, implement it, and now, everybody has to follow it. Well, the Supreme Court in 2024 said, no, that we're not doing that anymore. And it's going to be strict adherence to the statutes. And if the statute is vague or ambiguous, you don't get to interpret it and come up with your own interpretation as far as your authority. And basically it gutted the ability of these federal agencies really to do much rulemaking or regulation. And as an take CLEs and the CLEs that I've seen regarding the 2024 decisions of the Supreme Court, all are dealing with, the different political decisions like the immunity decision, presidential immunity decision, and things like that. And so they're highlighting the key cases from the Supreme Court. And what's interesting is I never saw any of them really touch on this Loper-Bright case, which in my opinion is probably the biggest decision from the Supreme Court in changing the narrative of, in some ways politics, but in more particular bureaucracy, and how, these federal agencies can operate, the power that they have. Now, once again, it's the Loper-Bright case hasn't stopped federal agencies from adopting rules. In fact, in the real estate space, we've seen that with the rule that goes into effect December of this year, in which LLCs purchase property in cash. They have to now report to FinCEN a bunch of beneficial ownership information. That's still out there. I'll be curious to see how the Loper-Bright case, how this case, how the decision on the CTA impacts that rule and whether or not it's going to survive and last. But this 11th Circuit case as to this one-to-one consent rule shows us that it's going to take time, but the courts are not going to allow these federal agencies to continue with rules and regulations that they've adopted unless the statute very specifically gives them that ability and it's well within the authority of the statute. And we're going to probably see more and more cases come before our courts on federal rules and regulations and striking them down, and which, depending on what you feel about bureaucracy and kind of what side you're on, that may or may not be a good thing. From my perspective and representing a lot of real estate investors and small businesses, I think it's a good thing that we're going to have less rulemaking. If there's going to be laws passed, then it would be done through congressional action and signed into law by the president. It would be actual legislation and an act, and we'll have less interference by bureaucracy or these federal agencies on small businesses, real estate investors doing business. So it's going to take time, but I think that the Loper-Bright case is huge for small businesses and real estate investors. And we'll see how it plays out with some other rules and regulations that impact investors and small businesses going forward. But at least for now, it has eliminated this one-to-one consent rule, which I think is a good thing. And then if Congress wants to, close that loophole, then they can pass an act and create legislation to that effect.
All right. Thank you, Sean, for the legal update. Reminder, every Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Arizona time is the Creative Finance Collective. If you've got questions about creative finance, that is the time to join us live. Sean and I and other attorneys in the space throughout the country that practice in the area of creative finance get together talk about what we're seeing, but we're really there to answer questions. And we're only on there as long as we're getting questions. So if you have questions about what creative finance looks like, maybe you've got a fact pattern you've dealt with, maybe you're looking for a referral to an attorney in a different state to help you with a particular issue, we're there to try to help you in that regard. So make sure to join us 3 p.m. Arizona time, the Creative Finance Collective. You can be there in all the spaces that you can for this show, X, Facebook, and YouTube. So join us live. That's really the best time to be a part of it, so you can ask those questions. All right, so we're going to get into our topic today. So this is the first month of February. And what is February? It's the month of love. That's the time where we have Valentine's Day, so on and so forth. So what we wanted to introduce is a series of shows that we're calling the Falling in Love series. And today is the first show of that series, and we're calling it the Falling in Love with Real Estate. So this is less a show about the nuts and bolts of a particular technique and more about enjoying and falling in love with the concept of real estate investing and being in the real estate space. And we'll be adding new series throughout the month. So we look forward to rolling those out. But with us to discuss falling in love specifically with real estate is our guest, real estate investor Andrew Engel. Andrew, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Now, we understand you're an owner of Fresh Pick Leads. Tell us about that company and what does it do?
Yes, Fresh Pick Leads is a lead generation company. We focus on providing basically court record leads. So people who are in very motivated situations who may have the propensity to sell. What we do is we collect every divorce, eviction, foreclosure, and probate case filing throughout the entire state of Wisconsin every single day. And then we provide that data to our subscribers. People can log on to our website, subscribe by county, and then each day they have access to whatever was filed for that day. So it's the quickest way to get that information in Wisconsin, since it's pulled daily. So it is Wisconsin only, but that's essentially what we do.
Good information. So, Andrew, this is a show devoted to real estate investors, and today our topic is real estate. But before we get into kind of how you got into it, just break down, since we know you're a real estate investor yourself, what real estate investment strategies do you like? I know that those kind of things, which you like and which you can use in a given market, what's being given to you changes from market to market. So what strategies do you like right now, and what main type of properties are you investing in right now?
So my primary exit strategies are wholesaling, fix and flipping, and holding rentals. Since interest rates went up, I primarily look to hold rentals in creative finance terms. So I work a lot with sellers to find more win-win situations where cash offers just don't make sense. So we can buy some prettier houses that way, as long as the terms make sense. We can pay a lot more. But if it's not the creative finance terms or any of that, we're typically wholesaling or fix and flipping day to day.
Sure. So, one of the things that this show was really designed for, today's show anyway, was to talk about and find folks that made their way into real estate, loved the process, and to kind of discuss the transition you made getting into the real estate space. Why don't you kind of break down for us and for our listeners, how did you first become kind of interested and introduced to the space of real estate?
Well, I have the very unique story of reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and having that kind of kick off my interest in the space. I guess a little bit before that, I had been working a full-time remote position for a software company. Realized that I was just secluding myself, kind of getting bored with my life. It really wasn't an eventful life. It was just kind of staying inside and not leaving. I'm very interested in the kind of tech world and coding and computers. And this actually started by my interest in Bitcoin, and I dabbled in it and kind of got in and out. And I was like, I don't love reading white papers. That's very boring to me. So getting into these IPOs and things, it just wasn't exciting. But there was an influencer I was watching at the time. He showed that he was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm like, I'm going to give that a shot. I haven't read a book since high school. Let's give it a go. And I did that. And from literally from that book on, it just completely changed my perspective on building assets and what I should be doing with my time, not playing video games and spending all of my time on hobbies, but really have more of the hobby of business and work on things that actually matter once they're completed, which is, building something that generates money.
Now, you mentioned you were working at the time. Was this kind of standard 8 to 5 office type work? You said it was kind of text based, but you were.
Yep, regular 8 to 5. I was working more than that, but it was still 100% remote. So it was still what I call golden handcuffs. I had a lot of perks to the job. I loved the job. It was easy to me because I had done it for so many years. So that actually kind of made it a little bit difficult to leave it after a while because it was so comfortable.
So on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I've read it years ago, but if I remember, it isn't just about real estate. It has other, investing concepts and things like that. So you read the book, but then why real estate? I know you talked about Bitcoin and stuff, but why did you choose real estate as opposed to some other type of business venture or things like that?
Well, for me, it just seemed so relatable. And I know I think even Kiyosaki says it's not necessarily a real estate book, but there are a lot of real estate concepts to them. And for me, they just really related to what I wanted to do, which wasn't necessarily tech, which is what I was really interested in. But what I found is that I could use my tech skills to build more of almost like a blue collar business. And I loved that balance of both worlds. So that's kind of what got me into it. But I've never really understood the whole building an asset and having an asset and relating that to housing. And it wasn't until I read that book that housing just made a ton of sense. And it just instantly, I just gravitated towards it and got super excited about it. And that excitement just really never left.
Now, what did you do? So there's one thing about taking an idea, which sounds in the moment, right? So brilliant. And almost just overly simplistic. It's like, why wouldn't I do that? Right. But it's one thing from taking it from idea to practice and to conception. So what did you do? I mean, did you just jump in right away, or what did you begin thinking through? Okay, what is my transition going to look like from the 8 to 5 to what is obviously kind of a different working life and practice when you're attacking real estate? What did that transition look like?
Great question. Because I absolutely did not jump in both feet. But the funny thing is when I read that book, it was an immediate transition of I know that I'm no longer going to be a W-2 employee because I know now there is this other way and I know that I can do it. It's just, I am somebody who is very susceptible to analysis paralysis. I love the learning side. I love, listening and absorbing and trying to figure something out inside and out really before even taking action. And while there are some benefits to that, it also extends the timeline significantly from learning about it to implementation. So it was a long learning curve, and not even a long learning curve. I learned a lot in a short amount of time, but it took much longer for me to actually gain up the confidence to actually take that next step and go that next part. And that's actually where Fresh Pick Leads started, is because I wanted to get into real estate, start investing. And my first transition was, okay, how do I start? Like, what do I do here? I know so much now. I've listened to books, I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, been reading nonstop. What's step one? And it was, get leads, start finding leads. And I heard a good friend of mine talking on Facebook about how he found, how he was collecting different court records and marketing to those people. And that's where I was like, oh, okay. I know I wouldn't do that or I know I could do that, but I wouldn't be consistent. And if I'm not going to be consistent at it, I might as well not even start, because it's going to fail. So that's where I'm like, well, I would do this a different way. And I wrote up a program, got really into that, and built something that would just capture all of that automatically. And it was that just single effort that I ended up turning that into a business, because a lot more people could use that service than just me. So I actually built that business and started going to RIAs and sponsoring the RIAs and building my network for about 3 years of just doing that and learning more and about marketing and what people are doing for marketing and what helps when people are marketing, before actually really diving in and buying my first property.
So did you start Fresh Pick Leads before you even had one investment property?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And so you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you do some other, reading, podcast listening, and then you create basically a software company that real estate investors can utilize, which then, of course, to market that, you're going to RIAs and stuff. At what point did you actually say, I need to buy a piece of real estate as an investment? When did you finally come to that conclusion?
The intent was to do it immediately, but I got so sidetracked with building this business, and rightfully so. It benefited me in a lot of ways in terms of building my name and reputation among all the people that I was going to be doing business with, and all the people that I would be learning from in the real estate space. And it took some time, but I was almost going into it like, hey, you know what? Maybe real estate isn't what I should be doing. Maybe I should be starting a software business and going the tech route, and just that would be my assets, not houses. But honestly, over time, like the intensity of me wanting to invest in real estate, buy houses, that never left. So it was now after that 3 years is when I was like, this is enough. I know more than almost anyone who's actually getting into real estate for the very first time. Like those very first people who are doing their very first deals, I probably know way more than them, and I'm still not doing it. And I got actually just so frustrated with myself after that 3 years. I'm like, that's it. There's no more questions. I need to do this year.
Yeah. Well, one constant theme we get from real estate investors throughout the space and talking and giving advice for first timers, it's, find mentors, get out there and meet people. And whether you plan this or not, and maybe you just backed into it, but you came to those people with something that had added value to what they did, which got you an audience, which essentially bought you the mentorship, right? It sounds like you were able to kind of begin grabbing that, building a reputation as you went forward. It's interesting. It sounds like, there's two ways I think that most folks jump into this. It's just jump in and break a bunch of things and learn along the way. And then there's, just learn as much as you can and then do it. And you're a learner on the front end, it sounds like. Were there any other books or anything else, research that you found valuable in that process, or in hindsight now looking back, would you thought of, well, I probably overthought it. I got a lot of value with just meeting people and learning along the way. And any other things of benefit that you saw along the way, or just wasted endeavor?
I think at the beginning, reading a couple books, listening to podcasts, reading articles, I think is definitely necessary, but only to a certain point. Like you can do that for 2-3 months while you're dipping your toes into the space to understand, is this even something that I want to do? And I would say I did way too much of that. And the most beneficial thing to do is to meet people, talk to people. And you bring up the mentorship thing. You know, I hear people say, hey, I need some mentors. I'm looking for some mentors. And I think that's the wrong way of going about it, honestly, because as you said, you have to provide value. And not everyone knows how to provide value, right? Like everyone's like, well, what do I have to offer? I don't know anything about any of this stuff. How am I supposed to do that? Well, I'd say everybody has some sort of unique skill that can be applied to this, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Like what you should be doing is just making friends. Like just go there and make friends. Your friendship is valuable, and you will find who you connect with, and the people who you connect with and they connect with you, they're just naturally going to become your mentors. Like you don't have to ask. It's just go there, build relationships, make friends, and then you have a network of people that you can reach out to when you feel stuck or scared or don't know the answer on something.
So walk us through your first investment property. You've taken the cautious route. You've tried to learn as much as you can. By now, you've met a lot of people. You haven't said this, but I'm kind of presuming that you're still in your W-2 8 to 5 job. I don't know if that's the case, but you know, you got a lot of balls in the air right now, it sounds to me like. So walk us through kind of jumping into that first investment.
Sure. Well, at the beginning of that year, like I said, I was like 3 years in, and I was like, okay, enough's enough. I am buying a property this year. Then there's no questions asked. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I would be starting that January. I went to all the RIAs I normally went to. I think it was usually about 3 a month. And everybody knew me there. So that was a benefit to me because I was now a regular and a sponsor. So that helped. And I just started telling everybody like, hey guys, I'm buying property now. Like if you have anything that fits this particular criteria, let me know. And that was helpful because then, you know, I'm telling my friends, right? I've now made friends. They're telling their friends like, hey, actually, I think he might be selling something. He might be selling something. And I think it was when I started doing that in January, by March, I'd gotten a referral from somebody saying, hey, he's looking to sell right in your town. Why don't you go talk to him? So spoke with him, and he was a mutual sponsor of the RIA as well. So we already knew each other. We hadn't really had any conversations much, but it was a good reason to start talking. And it was through that relationship that we ended up closing on the first deal, buying it from him 30 days later.
And what kind of transaction was it? Was it a fix and flip, a buy and hold? What did you end up doing with the property?
BRRRR strategy. So
okay.
I acquired rehab, and I still own that one today as a rental.
And how did you go about purchasing it? Did you do hard money? Did you? Yeah,
Yep.
You did hard money. Okay.
I did hard money, and actually the investor I bought it from owned a hard money lending company, so he also lent on it.
Oh. Okay.
And for me, that was pivotal because I have no experience in renovating properties, in even home maintenance, like nothing. So it was a huge relief to me to know that the person I'm going to be buying it from is also going to be lending on it. And I knew his reputation and how much he upheld that. And I knew if the numbers work for him, they're going to work. Like I may not know exactly what my rehab budget is, but if I can use him to help us both be successful, that's a win. And you know, I know that they've turned lots of people down for just not having a good enough deal. Mm-hmm. So this was pure proof that it was a good enough deal, and I just had to figure out how to make it work.
So you've jumped in, you've bought this property, you've used hard money. So, and you're going to use the BRRRR strategy. So obviously there's a rehab. So where do you even find people to work on the property that are going to do it for your budget and do a good job? Like how'd you even go about that?
Well, that's where the network came in. I had built that network for 3 years, and that's really what gave me all of the cushion that I needed to find whatever resources that I needed. But luckily, actually, a friend of a coworker, essentially, he does this full time. He renovates properties for flippers. But he lives like 2 hours away from me, but he agreed, we talked and he was excited and he agreed to come up and actually stayed with me for like 2 months and worked on that project every day. He knew what the budget was and everything. And we were able to knock that whole thing out. But it didn't start off that well. Cause I mean, before that, I actually thought that I would just hire a GC. They'd take care of the whole thing. I could sit back at home and not have to deal with any of this renovation stuff. They would just do it for me. I'd just tell them what needs to be done. And I had a $30,000 rehab budget on this thing that I needed to stay under. And I got in touch with the GC, walked him through the whole thing. He was like, okay, I'll get back to you with a quote. And he comes back with a quote at $90,000, not including the roof that needed to be replaced. And I actually, that was like the biggest gut punch to date, because that freaked me out so bad, because it was like my first bid on anything. And I thought, am I way off here? And I'm naturally risk adverse. So hearing that like just put a stress knot in my chest for like 3 days. I thought I was going to like have a heart attack. But it all ultimately just came down to just reaching out to people, being like, hey, what do you recommend for this? What should this actually cost? And ended up that I just had to GC the whole thing. It was a big learning experience, but it got me over a lot of fears.
So you basically were out there finding the roofer, finding the flooring person, doing all of that on your own. And then it sounds like you had a kind of almost like a handyman, person that, is good with construction that was helping you out on top of that.
Yes. It was my first jump into just getting bids on things and determining what is the best price for the value. We don't always want to go with the lowest person if they can't back it up with some proof of quality or accountability.
So for those types of properties today, are you still doing that same thing? Are you still acting as your own GC, or have you evolved?
I still do GC my projects, or I oversee them. Maybe I'm more like project manager because I don't have my GC license or anything like that.
Right.
But
Understood. Yeah.
But I've met many more people, and I do have people that I trust to work on my houses, and it allows me to stay completely out of the houses now. I'll go to them to just check up and make sure that things are being done on the time and of quality. But outside of that, I try to stay out of them as much as possible, because over the years, I've found that the more I'm in the properties, the longer they take and the worse they look.
So having gone through the process of this first property, and it sounds like that first property with its ups and downs turned out to be a pretty good experience. How soon before you were into the next deal? Was it, okay, I got this, I've done it, I'm not a rookie anymore, let's go full bore? Or did you still kind of maintain a cautious strategy in ramping and scaling your real estate investment kind of portfolio?
Well, I would say that experience took away like 90% of my severe risk aversion and fear over the whole thing, the whole process. But jumping into the next one, so that really wasn't that big of a deal after that. Mm-hmm. But it did take about 6 months. And while I was working on that first project, I realized that I had completely stopped looking for properties. Like I wasn't telling anyone that I was buying properties. I wasn't doing any marketing or driving for dollars, anything like that. And I realized that's a problem. Like I cannot just restart from scratch every time I find it and finish a property. So, but yeah, it did take me to that next one. And I actually bought it from the same investor. This time he wholesaled it. And that one was a fix and flip.
So I want to explore a couple things. You've used the term, you're cautious, you're risk adverse, all good qualities, by the way. You've also mentioned things like Bitcoin. You've mentioned things like going into real estate investing, which is entrepreneurial. Bitcoin is not, though I would disagree with this, but by a lot of those that are not in it, considered something that maybe somebody who's risk averse wouldn't be involved in, right? Because of the volatility associated with it, so on and so forth. But given kind of your cautious approach to moving forward and to make sure you did it right, break down some of the mechanics on how you kind of jumped from the safety of your W-2 job, right? There's safety in that, that's there, and you can continue doing that and get a paycheck, versus transitioning to the unknown. It doesn't sound like you just said, all right, real estate's for me, shut it down, we're jumping into the other one. You transitioned. Walk us through kind of what that looked like and how you were able to eventually make that leap out of working for somebody else and entirely for yourself.
Yeah. Well, it was a long process. And when I say long, it truly was from the time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad to when I quit my job. It was almost exactly 5 years. So the what it came down to was, a lot of getting our financial house in order. So, when I first read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I'm like, we're going to buy a rental. And my wife and I were looking at, we're reaching out to different mortgage companies and seeing like what we could be approved for, what have you. We didn't even own a personal house at this point, but I had put in an application. I got a call back from one of the loan officers, and she's like, you know what, I got to tell you something. I don't think you should buy a house. And I was like, why not? And she's like, well, you are you're pretty far in debt. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And sure enough, we look at all of it. Between student loans, my wife and I had student loans, we had credit card debt, we had cars, all this stuff, and we had like a negative $200,000 net worth. And it was kind of like another gut punch to think, okay, well, more money doesn't solve this. It is we're doing something fundamentally wrong. So let's fix that. And then we can start back on track into getting into kind of like this investing space. So we spent probably 5 years snowballing debt, budgeting like crazy, and talking constantly, communicating on how we're paying off all this debt. But the more debt we paid off, the more money we were able to keep every month. So we're both working W-2s, and during this snowballing of debt payoff time, I was getting more and more into the real estate investing and starting to wholesale more and fix and flip, and starting to see a lot more active income come in. Because buying rentals, we realized quickly that's not the path to quit your job quickly. So that's when we started looking more at the wholesaling and fix and flipping. And over time, I was able to, get some marketing money in the bank, build up a little bit more cash reserves, and eventually, once our massive debt was paid down and paid off, we realized that we could transition where my wife's income was covering all of our expenses, all of our living expenses, and my W-2 income was just going towards the business. So at that point, we made the sever of my reliance on a job. And I worked that way for a year or two. And eventually it just came to the point where my wife was actually the one who kind of pushed me over the edge and say, I think it's time. If you don't do this now, what are we waiting for? We can do it. And you've had enough success, not necessarily to replace what you're bringing in on your W-2, but you've had enough success where if you can do this part-time, you should be able to definitely replace your income full-time. So we just made the jump at that point, but it was a thought out, cautious approach.
Well, so I want to talk a little bit about that and the restructuring of your finances and figuring things out. I mean, you go on and you watch these, YouTube videos and posts and all this stuff by these real estate investors, and they're driving their, Lamborghinis and they're in front of their big houses, and you think, oh man, this is the way to go. But, and we don't know what it took for them to get there. But I do know from experience, both personally and even working with some clients, I mean, in order to basically be your own boss, there's a lot of financial sacrifice that goes into it. What are some examples of the sacrifices that maybe you and your wife made in order to put yourselves in a position that you could, in fact, quit your job and invest in real estate full time?
Yeah, I think the majority of sacrifices came in during the time of us snowballing all that debt, because we had to, not go out to eat anymore. And we had a kid by that point. We actually had moved to my parents' lake home, and we had intended to be there just for like a small amount of time, but we actually extended that to about a full year of just living there, just paying utilities, and that was a huge help to be able to snowball more for a long time. And honestly, COVID helped too. On our student loans, we had 0% debt on our federal student loans for many years. And, that was a reason for a lot of people to not pay it anymore. But that was all the more reason for us to keep making those payments consistently, because it was paying down that debt so considerably. And I think we saved like 7 years worth of interest by just paying our normal payments every month. So it was really just being super conscious and aware of it at all times. And that in itself, I think, is just a sacrifice for people to put that much intention towards not getting what they want every day.
Yeah, well, and to further Sean's point, in an age of, YouTube influencers that are like, hey, you can get rich fixing and flipping, overnight kind of thing. The other sacrifice, which you've kind of mentioned, but maybe not said it as a sacrifice, is your time. I mean, when we talk about 5 years from idea to the point where you're leaving your job, you've been marketing all that time. You've been learning. You've been spending all this time while doing your regular job, right? Just to make money. You've added onto that. So yeah, that's going to come, and with a child, so on and so forth. That's going to come with a significant time sacrifice, I have to imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But just like I said, like there's since reading that book, there's no turning that switch back. Like it's just that's how it is now, and I know that this is the way forward. And even if it's not real estate moving forward, like in 10 years or whatever, maybe it's owning businesses or what have you, but it is absolutely still the core fundamentals of building assets and keeping those assets. And those assets are essentially what is your job.
So as you made this transition, you mentioned it took about 5 years. It sounds like it, if I'm doing the math correctly, 5 years from book to quitting your W-2 job, but it looks like that was about a 2-year time frame from the time you did your first real estate investment to the point you finally quit your job. Now that you've done that, you've been past that. Real estate investing is a full-time job. Have you matched what you were making before? Do you do better than what you did before?
Yep. I do better.
Now, how long did it take you to kind of reach? Well, how long do you think it took you to reach kind of break-even point where you're like, okay, I'm doing exactly what I did as a W-2 employee?
It was really, I don't know if there was a break even. The year before I quit my job, I had made maybe a little under half of what I made in my W-2. But I figured that's part-time. So the proof of concept is there. It's just if I would put all of my time in it, I should, in theory, be able to exceed or meet what I was making in my W-2. And the first year I did exceed what I was making in my W-2. And then the year after, and when I say exceed, it was, a little bit above what I had made the first year. But that second year, I doubled that. And I want to double that again this year. So it's definitely worth the sacrifice and the time that I put in, and the proof of concept showed that it was possible.
Now, you mentioned, you had, when you were early on working your W-2 job, you had just kind of dissatisfaction with the process, and where things were going. Now, jumping forward a number of years later, you're out of that space. You're doing better and much better in the real estate space. How are the benefits significant? Take aside the money. Obviously, you're doing better financially from it. Have you enjoyed the process of basically being an entrepreneur and making your own decisions in comparison to where you were when you were experiencing that dissatisfaction?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. The most freeing thing for me in the entrepreneurial space is just understanding the concept of it's up to you to determine how much money you make. Like, I could sit in a W-2 and try to, do as much as I possibly can to make a certain amount, but it's ultimately not up to me. It's up to the people who decide whether to promote me or if I do want to get another job, well, it's up to that next individual to determine how much they're going to pay me. So I never really had full control. There's things I could do to help, but I didn't have 100% say in it. And that's what I absolutely love about entrepreneurship is you can say whatever number you want that you want to make, but it's up to you to make the plan and execute on that plan to get there. But nobody's telling you you can't make a certain amount. And to me, that is the most liberating part of it. And no matter how hard things get in the entrepreneurial space, there's never a question that I would be going back to a W-2 life.
But I also know that it's not always, a perfect world in that space, and that there's struggles. So, what are some of the struggles that you've had as a full-time real estate investor that maybe you didn't have as a W-2 employee?
I would say the accountability there's accountability in W-2 world, but it is on a completely other level in the entrepreneurial world, because at the end of the day is everything is up to you. And that a side effect of that is feeling guilty for taking a vacation or taking off. And then a side effect of that is feeling guilty for not being present with your family or your kids. And it's this constant pendulum of making sure that family's happy, making sure that business is running well, because those switches don't turn off. It's just trying to muffle them with balancing everything else in your life. And you don't have that as a W-2 employee. W-2 employee, you can go home and just forget about it all. And I think that is the best part about being a W-2 employee is you can just have a completely careless after work lifestyle.
Now, with your shift to real estate, I'm curious, have you still maintained your interest in kind of the digital asset space and things like Bitcoin?
I keep an eye on the prices, but I have not been pouring money into it or following it enough to continue to purchase it. Not to say that I wouldn't, because it does still fascinate me, the whole blockchain thing and everything. But I've just shifted that passion towards more just utilizing my tech skill sets to assist and further develop my real estate side of my business.
Sure, that's where your passion's at. So you've got a lot of hindsight at this point. You spent a good bit of time working into this space. I'm sure you've got plenty of, well, I could have tweaked this or done this a little bit differently. If you were meeting with kind of a newbie, you're the mentor now, right? Somebody's coming and talking with you. You know, how are you recommending somebody who's new to this space start that process?
I say two things. One is, and I've already touched on it, so I'm not going to go super deep into it, but network, make friends. It's simple. Just make friends at RIAs. Go to RIAs, make friends, learn from them, and they won't have an issue answering your questions. And then you have a phone full of numbers of people you can call when you're ready to jump in or stuck on something. In addition, I would say find out why you're doing this and what you are trying to accomplish. What type of lifestyle are you trying to achieve? Because there are so many shiny objects in real estate, and all of them work, but not all of them are going to give you the life that you want or are going to suit the type of work you like doing. So if you start with the end in mind and then really figure that out, very detailed, and then that'll help you make decisions when you're looking into these different strategies that you're trying to get into. And lastly, I say, when you are actually getting into it, like, do not forget or do not pass up the chance to give away profit in deals in exchange for education. That is something I'm a huge proponent of, because that is the fastest way to learn. If you have a deal and you have a chance to partner with someone who's done this for years and you just aren't confident or you don't really know what you're doing, give the deal to them. Give the 50% of it more. It doesn't matter. Like, the education that you're going to gain is going to take you into the next one by yourself. And you can just keep doing that with everything that you want to learn. And people are so focused on that profit, but in the beginning, it's about buying the education, honestly. And that is done through the actual work and bringing in people and bringing value to them to gain off their expertise.
I think one thing that people don't appreciate until after the fact, and I love that you bring that up with the education side of it. You're going to pay for your education one way or the other. You're going to pay for it by screwing up and having to hire maybe people like Sean and I to litigate over a problem, or you're going to pay for it on the front end, right? And there's much better ways to build value with other partners and everything else. But I can't tell you how much we've heard the same thing. Don't be afraid to bring the right people into the deal that are going to walk you through it. It's going to pay dividends in the future.
Absolutely.
Andrew, we really appreciate you taking the time. This has been really good information. Tell our listeners how they can find and connect with you.
You can find me at a couple different places. So if you can check out Fresh Pick Leads, freshpickleads.com for the lead generation service. You can find me on Facebook under my personal name, Andrew J. Engel, Instagram, and my home buying website, fastsellingSolutions.com as well.
All right, Andrew, it's been awesome having you. We appreciate you taking the time. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. This was great. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Have a good one. With that, everybody, that is our show. Make sure to join us next week and this afternoon at 3 p.m. Arizona time for The Collective. We'll see you then.
Have a good day, everyone.